Time now to go inside out. From your Twitter timeline to your living room, it's SNY MLB Insider Andy Martino. And Andy, obviously you've been all over this with your updates on Twitter. So where do negotiations stand between the Mets and Max Scherzer?
Well, there was an intense courtship, I should say, of Scherzer over the weekend by the Mets, details of which have now been learning here as we speak on Sunday night, Eamon, just involving Steve Cohen and Scott Boras and Scherzer and members of Scherzer's family. And just the Mets really trying to make a case to Scherzer that they want him to be a huge part of their culture here. And the first really big pitching coup of the Steve Cohen era. They obviously traded for Francisco Lindor and then signed him last year. Scherzer, even obviously a much more accomplished player. So in addition to that courtship that took place, they've made him an historic offer, which is more than $40 million a year on a multi-year deal. I call that historic because that would make Scherzer the record breaker now in annual value in a contract. No player has ever made $40 million a year in the history of the game. So the Mets are trying to do that for Scherzer, to have him come here. What they're doing right now is waiting on his decision. I am told from other people around the industry that have been talking to Scherzer and other teams that have been talking to Scherzer that the expectation from them is now that Scherzer is going to go to the Mets. But I want to emphasize that there's no agreement at this moment. Mets and Scherzer, that's not a done deal. It's just a gathering sense of momentum after the Mets, as I said, historic offer to him.
All right, you mentioned courtship, and we know that the neighborhood, as you just said, the historic north of $40 million a year, that kind of money would bring Scherzer to the Mets. What could now possibly get in the way of this deal and keep him away from Flushing?
The only thing that would get in the way of this, Eamon, other than, failed physical, which could always, I suppose, happen with a free agent signing, is Scherzer's decision on what he's going to do. We don't know all the teams that are in the mix. That hasn't been reported, and I don't know all of the teams that are in the mix on him. But he just has to talk with his family and think on his own and think, do I want to be a Met? That does seem to be the way this is going, but certainly nothing financially would get in the way. Mets wanted to blow him away with an offer, bowl him over with their desire for him financially. They've done so. So the only snag that you could really foresee at this point would simply be Scherzer deciding not to be a Met. Kevin Gausman did that earlier tonight. The Mets offered him, I'm told, about $10 million more than the $110 million that he got from Toronto. They put on a full court press for him. Gausman decides to go to the Blue Jays. So it's only that kind of thing that could get in the way with Scherzer.
Andy, you used the word coup to describe what this could possibly mean to the Mets if they bring him here. How would you describe what's at stake right now here for this franchise?
Well, getting him would be a significant indicator to the rest of the league and to other players that the Mets are now willing to spend the money to become a destination and bring in players like Scherzer, who are universally perceived as winning players. Plenty of the nonsense that's gone on with the Mets, not just last year, but over the course of their history, really, into last year, has given a lot of players pause over whether they want to come here. And is this a stable place? And now with Steve Cohen being an unknown, players know he has money. They don't know what kind of culture he wants to build. So now Cohen has the chance, as he's been personally trying to close this deal, he has the chance to get a guy like Scherzer to buy in and become part of that. So that's massive from a symbolic perspective. And from a pitching perspective, really, if you want to look at it on a more micro level, with Gausman and John Gray now off the board and the Mets not particularly interested in a reunion with Marcus Stroman, Scherzer's the pitcher that they need as well. So it's a big statement and also just a path to potentially contending this coming season.
We'll have much more on the Mets' pursuit of Max Scherzer coming up here on Geico Sports Night. But for now, Andy Martino, thanks for joining us with the latest updates.
Thanks, Eamon.